Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of Gotham. So it was a very interesting episode. Basically, it's essentially Jim, Lucius, and Bruce trying to get out of Arkham before it explodes because Strange is being ordered by his secret, like the group he's working for, obviously the Court of Owls, basically to destroy, that whole place, because it's like we can't have any traces left of what you've been doing at Arkham this entire time. And so that's basically the basic premise of the episode. Some very interesting things, some things I liked. Last time I complained about the fact is I didn't want him necessarily being Clayface. I mean, it didn't outright call him that, but it's like something on the internet that like kind of conferred with me that it is Clayface. Maybe it's not, but you can interpret it as Clayface. But I was like, I wouldn't want him to be Clayface if he doesn't remember who he is. But then when I was watching this episode, I was like, actually, it's actually a good thing that he doesn't know who he is, because that makes him like more. It makes Clayface interesting because it's kind of like you no longer have an identity of your own, so it's easy to meld into other people's identities because it's easy to map yourself because you're kind of essentially a blank slate. Granted, it would be even more interesting if he did remember who he was, because it's like struggling with your own identity, being like, this is who I was, but now I'm all these different people. But I guess it's like that. I mean, we never really get to see what happens to him when he gets found out as being like a fake Jim, so I can only assume he's locked up. So I guess we will see him at some point later on down the road. But it'd be kind of interesting to see that kind of like dynamic of him actually like eventually kind of going completely crazy, because he goes around trying to pretend to be all these different people, adopt their personalities, adopt their lives, and it's just like too much for him. He goes a little nuts from it. I mean, we see him kind of barely piecing it together to be like Jim. I mean, because truth be told, that was kind of like a rush job of like, oh, here's this. I was like, oh, you're Harvey, blah, 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 blah. Oh, Barbara. Like, usually he only caught people's names because someone else said, like he caught Alfred's name simply because like Harvey said it. So, but it'd be kind of interesting to see it later on when he, given the opportunity that he really dives into it, that he ends up like, really studying the people he pretends to be, and eventually that causes a problem. I don't know. That's something I think would be very interesting to see. But like I said, we don't get to see like him after he gets found out. I did like the effect of when like Barbara slapped him. I did like it that it was like out of anybody that would notice that he's not Jim, it would end up being Barbara, not his partner, not Alfred, people who are around him a little bit more. But I get it's like, it makes sense. Him and Barbara were dating for a while. It's like, was that ever established how long they've been dating? Nevertheless, I like when she slapped him and then he came back and his face was all like squished like that, and you could see it kind of like trying to form back into place. So I thought that was kind of cool. So, a little bit, and still talking about Clayface, was that whole like chemical that made him be able to shift its face like that, is that something he's going to have to continuously have injected into himself? Because it doesn't seem like, what I'm trying to understand is does he naturally have that ability, or is it like it's there in his DNA, but he needs kind of like the molding materials, basically that solution that Strange had used on him. I mean, I'm guessing really that whole mold was made specifically so that they could, the solution was made to be able to mold Jim's face so that they could quickly kind of like, put it on him. So they needed a specific face really quickly. But I can, his face is naturally stretchy. I did forget about that. So maybe, from now on, like he needed that solution and that whole get up, just to kind of do it really quickly then. But maybe later on we'll see him kind of being able to do it on his own. So, but I know I've been like spending so much time talking about Clayface, but moving on. I did like the fact is that we have Penguin and Barbara kind of teaming up, because it's like Barbara, Penguin, and Butch, and basically I couldn't really tell. I assumed it's his like quote unquote stepmother's head, and he's basically trying to find a place to put it. It's like for decorative purposes, and Barbara's like, oh, it looks better over there. It's like, and it just seemed like they're getting like very close. It'd be quite interesting to see them kind of become a couple. I mean, it does seem like Barbara tends to lean more towards crazy, because there was a whole situation with Gallivan and Gallivan's sister, and now Penguin. I mean, he's obviously not the most well-adjusted individual, but it'd be kind of interesting, especially like when she was like, oh, telling him later on about like when she was in the police station, being like, oh yeah, that the GCPD are going after Hugo and stuff like that, and he's like, oh thanks, and she's like, you're welcome. It's just like that just that relation, like how they seem so far, just like, oh man, you're a gift to be around, that kind of mentality. It'd be interesting to see that relationship develop, because I mean, do correct me if I'm wrong, I don't actually know if Penguin has ever had any significant others in the comic books. Maybe he has, I'm just not familiar with it. Anytime I've ever seen Penguin, he's always been on his own. He's never had like a lady to kind of keep him in check, so it'd be kind of interesting if it was Barbara. There's the fact of the matter is that I like the scene where Jim kind of gets injected with the that true serum, and I like, to me it magnifies Strange in its like, it kind of hones in on like his mentality, that he kind of like, he's like, oh, talking to Jim, being like, oh, I'm God, and I absolve you of your guilt, because he's always felt guilt about everything, about Bruce, about Lee, and he feels like it's all his fault. And he's like, "Oh, I absolve you of all this guilt. You should rid yourself of it." To me, that locks in, because like that's why Hugo does everything he does, because in some twisted way, he does think of himself as a god. Like, I am the one that brought all these beautiful creatures to life, and it's like, to me, I was like, the hubris of this guy, just like, oh, I'm God, because I think he not just saying that to Jim. I believe he was actually saying it to himself, because he truly thinks of himself as a god. I mean, especially now that he's, successfully brought people back to life. It's just, it kind of, I don't know. That was just something I couldn't, end up like. It's just something that just caught my attention. But I like that truth serum, because it made Jim admit some stuff that he probably never would have outright admitted if it wasn't for that situation. Because even Lucius, after he was saying all that stuff, was like, what kind of drugs did it give you? But he apologized to, Bruce, because he said, like, I'm sorry for making that promise to you that I solved your parents' murder. It was me being arrogant. And it's like, truth be told is, yeah, because in a situation like this, typically cops aren't supposed to make promises like that, because when you make a promise like that, you have to keep it. And when you don't keep it, it devastates that person. It's just like, you can't promise something that's not a guarantee. Like, because he came into this initially thinking like, oh, he's going to be the cop. He's going to change everything, help Gotham become a better place. And he just got in his head, like, he sees this little kid who's broken. His entire world has been shattered. And he thinks, it is arrogant of him to think like, oh, I'm gonna help this kid. I'm gonna piece his life back together. It's like, no matter what you do, like, his life will never be the same, because his parents are gone. I mean, especially at such a young age. But to promise him such a thing, like, because Bruce has held onto that promise, which is like a lot of the time the reason why him and Jim kind of have disagreements, and he kind of has a fallout with Jim. Kind of is like, I'm not listening to anything Jim says. Like, I don't kind of respect him sometimes. It's because it's like Jim continuously breaks his promise about finding his parents' murderer. So, and I don't know. I thought it was kind of neat that we kind of got to see that, it did finally come out of him, because I feel like that's something Jim would never be able to willingly admit on his own, but it kind of brought that to light. And even Bruce was kind of like, oh, it's okay. He's like, no, I'm sorry. I apologize for doing all that. So that was kind of interesting. And we also got to a small little bit of like, Nigma doing his torturing thing, basically asking questions, essentially trying to figure out what they know. And he teased, the Court of Owls. I keep saying that because I'm surprised they didn't actually throw out the name yet, but I guess it kind of makes sense. Like I said, hopefully, sometime before season 3 starts, which just so has been renewed for a 3rd season. I found that out like a little while ago. But, like, it'd be interesting. I need to like actually look them up a little bit just to kind of get some background and just something relative to the comic books, to be like, oh yeah, like that's who they are, because like I know next to nothing. Like, to my recollection, I don't think I've ever seen any Batman I mean, there's probably been some, but of the Batman material I've seen, which isn't a lot, like, I've seen some of the animated series, that's about it. I don't think the Court of Owls has ever been a storyline that I've come across. Maybe I have and I don't remember, and maybe it's been a part of some, like, maybe it's actually been a part of some of the Batman storylines, Batman series that I've seen. I just don't, like, maybe I missed those episodes that dealt with this, or it's just like something I legitimately have never come across. So, because to anyone that is curious, the only Batman series I've ever really seen, Batman Beyond, some of the Batman, and that 90s Batman cartoon, Batman the Animated Series. Like, those are kind of the only ones that come to mind that I'm familiar with. But essentially, one of my favorite, like, it was such a weird thing. It's like Miss Peabody, the bomb's about to go off, and it's Lucius and Gordon. I did like when they were going down the elevator. He's like, "So, do you have any experience defusing bombs?" And Lucius was like, "Not yet, at least." You? And Jim's kind of like, "Eh." Which, because he's diffused at least one other bomb. I mean, not really diffused. It was basically the one that Nigma had set up. That bomb, that was kind of, to my knowledge, not unless there's something that came up in season 1 that I'm not remembering, but that's kind of my knowledge on like him dealing with bomb. But I did like that basically Miss Peabody's like, "Oh, water," and they're thinking like, "Okay, we'll pour water on it." They poured water, like, "Oh yeah," and then she's basically like, I was like, the moment that happened, I was like, they're getting water. I'm like, okay, she meant water for herself, right? And they're like, and the moment she's like, "Oh, I need water," and they're just like, they look at each other like, wow, literally a second left on the clock, and we just kind of went for it, and it's like, yeah, we could be dead right now. So that was kind of interesting. And there's also kind of a little bit of a showdown between Mr. Freeze and Firefly, which is kind of interesting. Like, that's come across in some other like shape or form before, but that was kind of cool to me because I've never seen Mr. Freeze go up against someone of the opposite element. Like, I've never seen him in any, like I said, the limited material I've ever seen him in, I've never seen him go up against a fire person before. So that was kind of neat. I did think it was like weird that when Strange got caught up in it, I was like, wow, did they just kill off Hugo like that? I was like, he's a pretty big Batman villain. It's like, and you're going to kill him like that? I was like, wow, he's like burned and frozen. I was like, wow, he's dead. And then Jim starts slapping him. I was like, oh, okay, he's still alive. I was literally about to say, you're going to kill off like a big time villain like him. It does make you wonder to like, in what he did get arrested in the episode. So it's like, because I was wondering like, where would they go with that character? Because it's kind of like, I feel like, Hugo is always held what he's done because he's able to do it in secret, but it's like he's out in the open now, so it's like, how can he continue doing what he's doing? So I was thinking like, I was like, okay, in my mind, I was like, if they decide to kill him, I guess that would make sense because it's like, what can you do with the character now? He's been outed as a madman, but it's like, I guess, we'll get to see maybe next season, like all of that falls through because of the Court of Owls intervenes, which I'm pretty sure he's not going to like because in his mind, well, I mean, the reality of the situation, if they have to intervene, they're going to intervene just so they can kill him themselves so that they don't have to worry about him ratting them out. Because granted, like, because Nigma kind of ran his mouth and obviously Hugo ran his mouth, both Bruce and Jim know that there's a secret organization behind Wayne Enterprises. Granted, they don't know its name, but still. But I also like the fact is that, Nigma was so, he's so caught up. He's like, oh, I'm doing all this work with Doctor Strange. It's like, I'd love to work with you more. And Strange is like, oh, yes, it'd be wonderful to see you work with us, too. It's like, we could learn from a madman like you and then put him in a cell. And it's like, but not a lot. So I was thinking that would have been interesting if we did kind of see that continued, like him actually working with Strange. It does make you wonder, like, what's going to happen. I mean, obviously, it's a big part of Gotham, so there's no way Arkham's going to get shut down. But it's like, it does make you wonder who's going to run things now. But I think I kind of got deterred away from, because, other stuff. Well, the point I was making earlier is, like, the fact is, I feel like, Hugo's going to come back. I guess they're going to like get rid of any evidence that'll prove like, oh, he's done some wrongdoing and stuff like that. So obviously we're going to like, it's like, oh yeah, now he's back at working at Arkham again. It's like, I don't know how that's going to happen. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But it's like, Arkham is kind of his playhouse where he does, those little experiments he does. We did get to see that a lot of the experiments got out. There was, the way he made it sound like there was one particular experiment that he was scared of amongst, any experiment he did. There was like one particular one that he was scared of. That's what it made it sound like. And do correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't really see any familiar faces though that I'm at least slightly aware of. Like, maybe like someone like Killer Croc might have been there or something. But it's like, once again, it's one of those situations because how the DC universe is, with its TV shows and its movies in regard that like, they're a little fickle about what you can do on TV and what you can't because it's like, oh, you can't use these characters because they're going to be used for the cinematic universe. Like, for example, Killer Croc is going to be in Suicide Squad, so it's like, would they even be allowed to even do a Killer Croc on Gotham or not, in regards to that? I mean, that's why you have characters like Catwoman and Poison Ivy, even though they're not the Poison Ivy, even though this takes place in the past and it's kind of kind of its own continuity like Smallville is, I guess in that same regard, they'd still be like, whoa, 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 we need access to this character, and we don't want you doing what you're doing with the character while we're doing what we're doing with the character type of thing. So it's like, it does make you wonder what character, like what, creatures or, monster people we know from the Batman series that would kind of make an appearance. We did see that long-haired Bruce Wayne, so a clone. To me, I feel like out of anybody, that might be the dangerous thing he mentioned, but it's like, what is that exactly? I'm sure, once again, because of my limited knowledge of comic books, that's probably something from the comics. Someone's like, oh yeah, you totally don't know what that is, that's totally blah, 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 blah. It's like, that's such a blank, blank, blank awesome storyline or something like that. I don't know. And we also have, obviously, the return of Fish Mooney. Obviously, she's been returned for a few episodes now, but it's like, no, only one episode now, right? Yeah. But in regards to the fact is that Penguin knows that she's alive, and so does Butch. So that's going to make things very interesting. To me, I thought, she was driving away with the bus. I was under the impression what was going to happen is that she's going to have her own little army of quote unquote freaks that are going to, that she's going to lead. She's going to be like a mother hen to them type of situation. And side note, like, since we're talking about all the people at Arkham, it's like, what happened to Firefly and, Mr. Freeze? It's like last time we saw him was with that whole situation with Hugo, but after that, did they get out of Arkham or what? I feel like they probably did, because it's like you got two big time villains like that. I'm sure that, they've got like, some plans for them. Not unless they're still locked up, but it's like, how do you really lock them up? Especially because they were equipped with their weapons and everything. So, but that was like the last time we saw them in the episode, so I am curious. But it'd be very interesting to see where things go from here, because we have Jim leaving to find Lee, because it's kind of like, everything is kind of all been put in perspective for him. It's like Hugo's been caught, but it's like there's still the greater threat that's behind the scenes, obviously. But, Jim is kind of being a little selfish, he's just like, he's kind of always put Lee in the back burner. He's always put his love life in the back burner because he's been so focused on trying to do the right thing. It's like, you could argue that basically everything he's done has been for, being selfish, because it's like, like once again, that arrogance of him thinking that he can change everything, which isn't, a bad thing, but it's just, he made it his main focus, and it's very selfish and egotistical to think that you're like, to put yourself to, in some regards, put yourself on this high pedestal that like you're going to be the pillar that changes everything. It is a bit arrogant and selfish and egotistical to think like that. I mean, is he thinking like that? Maybe not, but it's just like in that particular perspective, you could look at it like that. At least I do. And so it does make you wonder, like, how are things going to change in Gotham? Like, because I feel like between season 2 to 3, there's going to be a little bit of a time skip, to kind of reassociate with the fact is that we've got monsters running around Gotham now, which, like I said, it's weird because it's like, it in the Batman universe. It's kind of like, oh yeah, there's freak, like people, special people running around that are kind of monsters and have special powers and stuff like that. But it's like, it's because I think it's what throws me off is because this show started off so normal, like a basic crime drama almost, like, just like a kind of a bit of a police show. It kind of had that original aspect to it, and then you see it kind of adding these other elements. It's like, if it started off with those elements, it kind of makes sense, but it kind of just because in the beginning, it was just like, it was basically mobs. It was just a big, like, mob war is what the entire first season was about. And, like, since, particularly the second half of season 2 kind of stepped more into the more, like I said, science fictional aspect of everything, so. But obviously, we got Bullock being the lead, captain. It seems like that might be a permanent position, at least for a while. We didn't really get any more updates about their captain other than finding out, he was in recovery and stuff like that of being stabbed. So it's like, whether Bullock keeps the job permanently or not, or whether when Jim comes back and it ends up being someone else, I don't know. Like I said, it'd be kind of interesting to see what they do with, making this time skip, Maybe we'll get more Selena and Bruce working together again. I don't know. Maybe he will keep her at a distance, because even his like Jim talking kind of got him convinced of being like, yeah, that he realized, beforehand that he kind of pushed and manipulated Selena into this whole situation, which Selena's like, I do what I want. Like, you don't manipulate me. She's kind of like, it's kind of arrogant of you to think that you can manipulate me. It's like, she's like, out of anything, I've got you wrapped around my finger, essentially. So I don't know. Like, it'd be cool. Like, it's like, even at their ages, it's kind of like, there's part of me that's like, it's because you know what they grow up to be that they kind of have that kind of, not necessarily a love-hate relationship, obviously, like ally slash nemesis slash romantic elements to their relationship is very complicated. Let's just leave it at that. So I guess because of that, it's just like I see it, even like remnants of that already there, even when they're younger. So I guess that's why, like, I want that relationship to continue to build. And obviously we have, Alfred being very reluctant that we having to look into this like cold secret organization, Court of Owls. I keep saying that, but it'd be interesting to see, like, because I thought it was just like Arkham Asylum that they controlled this. Apparently, they run everything in Gotham, essentially, kind of working from the shadows. It's kind of like what their real purpose is. Like I said, I don't know. Like, we got the idea is like basically they wanted Hugo to do his experiments to look for a way towards immortality. So I don't, like, beyond that, it's like we really don't know what they really want. So it'd be kind of interesting to see them set up as the new intake. It does make you wonder, like, we kind of got introduced to the weird side of Gotham in the second half of the season, and I'm assuming we're going to dive even more into that next season with all those experiments running around. I don't know. Like I said, I guess they're going to really step up the weird in season 3. I mean, that's how I interpret it. So, other than that, I do wonder about the whole Jim and Lee thing, because it's always that like situation. It's like, Jim, you're going to have a daughter someday. She's supposed to be Barbara Gordon, and it's like, how's that going to happen when you have Barbara Keene being the psychopath that she is? Are you really going to name your daughter Barbara? It's such a weird thing. It's like, and it does. There's that, but it's also like it makes you wonder what the whole him and Lee situation is going to be. I like Lee, but it's like, will that relationship ever recover, after losing their child? And like, she kind of felt like Jim gave up, he kind of left them behind because he didn't want to drag them into this whole situation, when he got locked up for Gallivant, well, all that stuff. So I don't know, like, he is going to try and track her down. So, like I said, it'd be very interesting if we did get a bit of a time skip. It's a weird thing, I know, like, something I'd like to see in the future of Gotham, like, relatively soon. It'd be kind of interesting if we did kind of get him, like, Bruce, heading towards the path of being Batman a lot sooner. Like, maybe in this particular universe, we'll see him kind of enter the vigilante state a lot sooner. He gets trained a little bit more. Like, we've seen a little bit of his training with Alfred, but which, side note, that's always been a very interesting thing to me in this series, is the fact that we see Alfred as a badass. He was in the military, he did work, I don't think it was MI6. I don't think he did like spy work, but he, in the army in Europe, but it's just like, I don't know, like I never knew that aspect of Alfred, that he was a badass like that. So that was kind of cool. So he's done a little training with Bruce, but it'd be very interesting because I felt like, as with the whole Azrael thing, I thought that was going to heavily inspire him to like, kind of eventually like pick up that mantle. So it'd be kind of interesting if we got a little bit of a time skip and Bruce was kind of a little more like well trained, learn how to kind of fight and defend for himself. And, because it's really interesting. It'd be kind of interesting to see Bruce like, this kid who's always just stumbling forward, trying to figure out this mystery. And it's like, see him quickly just turn around. It's like, oh, you think Bruce Wayne is this kid that you've seen in the first 2 seasons kind of bumbling around. It's like, nope, now you've got like a more clear-cut Bruce who's just like more focused and more disciplined, or something like that. Like, in regards, I mean, he is a young kid, so it's to be expected for him to stumble, but it'd be kind of interesting if we did work around that. Like, I'm not saying, like, we have to jump up, like, oh, yeah, it's like next season, like, jump to 5 years and he's, like, already become a vigilante. It's like, no, but it'd be kind of interesting to see if, like, next season they lead him on that way of being a vigilante, especially with things being the way they are. So, like, I have no idea, like, what they will do for next season of, like, the tone of it, or like how things will be handled. Like I said, I keep saying it, like, the show started off so normal in the first season. Like I said, more main problem was mobsters. Now we're kind of kicking up the sci-fi aspect, and it is part of the DC universe, so it's not just the science fictional aspect. There's also the supernatural and fantasy aspects to it too, like magic. So it's like, will Gotham ever touch that? I don't think so, because I feel like magic in a series like this, I feel like magic will be too out there. You already, like, speaking of DC, we have Arrow tackling magic, and I feel like it's such a weird area to tackle. Like, to me, obviously the one that does it best, like Flash does science fiction the best because it's set up that universe to be science fictional. Everything else, like, obviously in its fictional world, even Arrow was set in reality until we started kind of, I don't have a problem adding magic into like that universe because it's like that is a big part of the DC universe. But DC has quite a bit of magic in it, so, but I don't think Gotham would ever go that route. I mean, who knows? I could be wrong. It'd be interesting to see how they would approach magic, especially, like I said, seeing how they're approaching the more science fictional aspects too, so. But that's honestly really all I wanted to talk about this episode. I liked it, and I cannot wait to see where we go in season 3. But till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.